Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities space. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, as always, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is an expert in the gold and silver sector and the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. We're going to be getting his thoughts on both gold and silver, as well as his outlook on de-dollarization and where he sees that headed here in 2024. It's Andy Schectman. Always an honor to have you on the show.
Jesse, good to see you, brother. Always an honor to be back here, and I do appreciate it. So look forward to the talk.
Well, since last time we spoke, gold hit nominal all-time highs in US dollar terms before retracing, currently sitting around the $2,000 level, which many see as the new support level for gold, although it did briefly dip below just the other day. Talk to us about how you interpret all of this and what you think it will take to get us back to all-time highs over a more sustainable time frame.
Yeah, we're back above 2000 today. Certainly, movements are magnified these days, as are emotions, if you will. But I think it's important to think of things in the context that in the United States, we've become obsessed with instant gratification not being fast enough. And if you look at gold, it is the tortoise. It's not the hare. If we go back to the beginning of 2000, for 24 years, gold has produced an annual return of 7.8%. Jesse, when we compare that, for example, to the S&P 500, 7%. When we look at the bond market, it's not even close. Gold has really, over time, outpaced just about everything else. And when we talk about, let's just look at the last few years as an example. And, everyone is focused on the fact that gold hasn't performed as well as it should have. And I agree with that. I agree with that very, very much. But, I think if you take a step back and look, in 2020, gold averaged 1773. In 2021, it averaged 1798. In 2022, it averaged 1801, and in last year it was 1943, and here we are above 2000. And when you reflect on the central bank purchasing, which has been taking advantage of, in my opinion, of the Western bank suppression, coupled with the epic monetary expansion of the last 4 years, I think the sky is the limit for the price of gold. And, look, bottom line to me is that gold will go higher than anyone thinks possible. You have the biggest money in the world, the most sophisticated money in the world, the most well-informed money in the world, the central banks, that are accumulating it. They're using the suppression of the paper market. I mean, if you look on Shanghai right now, gold is priced almost $100 higher in Shanghai than it is in London and on the COMEX. They are beginning to slowly arbitrage and turn up the heat. And a common theme that I talk about over and over and over again, and you can apply it to so many different areas in the world, whether it be socially, morally, economically, politically, it's called logarithmic decay. And it's little by little by little by little by little, then bang all at once. And what we have been seeing is a little by little by little movement of gold higher and higher and higher, really outpacing just about everything, but not getting any attention. And this started in 2000. Little by little, it has outpaced everything, but it's not flashy, and it is the tortoise. But in the end, it does what it's supposed to do. In fact, in all currencies around the world, with the exception of the dollar, just about we're at all-time highs, and it's doing what it is supposed to do. The dollar is blurring it because of its inordinate, in my opinion, unjustified strength. But be careful what you wish for. It will reach those all-time highs. It will do so probably in a fashion that catches almost everyone off guard. But the real question is what happens in that environment? Because to me, it's not gold going up, it's the dollar going down. And right now, it's actually performed pretty darn well after 11 straight interest rate increases and a dollar that's pretty darn strong, yet it's still showing great strength and resilience. And I would say, with the big BRICS meeting in October, 200 BRICS meetings up until that, leading up to that, to the big meeting in October in Russia, 200 meetings surrounding BRICS, and the election in November, chances are we'll see much, much higher gold before the music stops.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into discussing BRICS. I was speaking with Alistair McLeod recently. He also pointed out what you were just touching on, the fact that there are so many meetings going on. He believes that part of the agenda involved in all those meetings is trying to get the BRICS members to move towards either a gold standard or some sort of means of transacting within the BRICS ecosystem using gold to back some kind of currency. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are there on the trend of movement away from the US dollar. And I'm wondering if the escalating conflict in the Middle East also plays any role in your outlook for the US dollar.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't even think that they necessarily need to have a shared trade currency to chip away at the dollar. And if you look at the BRICS Plus, and if they all demanded that they pay each other, I mean, let's just back it up for 1 second. You know, what is the petrodollar? The petrodollar is that the oil is sold for dollars, and then the proceeds are reinvested in treasuries. And let's go back to what we were just talking about. Look, gold has outpaced the treasury market hand over fist. Not even close over the last decade and over the last 25 years. And if you realize that you're seeing massive divestment of treasuries by the central banks like Japan and China and Russia and Saudi Arabia, they're all selling treasuries and they're buying gold, using the suppression of the Western markets to drain the system. I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute, but point of it is that I think when you talk about it, if these countries trade with one another in local currencies until and if there is a local or a common settlement currency, and instead of putting the reserves, the excess reserves into treasuries, they put it into gold, which is what in large context, it seems to me that they are already doing. I think at this point there doesn't have to be a clear replacement for the dollar as the global reserve, because in essence what you are doing is chipping away at the settlement status of the dollar to such a degree that it begins to massively undermine the reserve status of the dollar. And in particular, when you're finding a replacement for the U.S. Treasury and a la gold, well, then it even has a bigger impact. But look, as far as I'm concerned, look, the Speaker of the House is an idiot, as is the current administration when they talk about confiscating Russian assets. Now, it's one thing to sanction them, like we did with Iran, and we just gave a bunch of that money back to them. But they're talking confiscating $300 billion in Russian assets and use it to continue to fight the war in the Ukraine. We just gave them another $60 billion, not a penny to the border, and we're broken, we're insolvent. But the bottom line is that the repercussions are cataclysmic for the dollar hegemony. And no country in the entire Southern Hemisphere will ever trust us again if we go to the exorbitant step of not just freezing and sanctioning and freezing interest payments and not allowing access, but we confiscate it. It's a whole different thing. Look, let me just put this into context for 1 second. Aside from the fact that 35 more countries have formally applied to the BRICS and 20 more informally, aside from the fact that 20% of all oil transactions were done outside the dollar, aside from the fact that as it is right now, BRICS account for a larger percentage of global GDP, 37 to 30. What I want people to understand is look at it from the perspective of these countries. We invaded Iraq 20 years ago in 2004, I believe, and we have occupied their country for 2 decades after toppling their regime, installing a new one, and destroying their country in search of weapons of mass destruction that, sorry, we didn't find them. Now, the rest of the world looks at us as being wholly hypocritical, where we set the rules as the world reserve standard. We can go in, we can sanction 14 of their banks 20 years after invading them, still occupy their land, and the money that they make in oil revenue, last year, $90 billion, is held at the New York Fed. They can't even control what they do with the proceeds of their oil sales. They asked the United States, Jesse, for $1 billion last year, and we said no to them. So what did they do? Well, they formally applied to BRICS. They made trading in dollars illegal if you own a business. They'll throw you in jail if you do it. and confiscate your business. They have gotten rid of all dollars in the country, and there are no banks that hold these, none in Iraq. And they have just publicly said they want all coalition forces out of the country. They look at us as hypocritical, yet we can do these things, and there is no ramification, there is no pushback. I think indeed that de-dollarization is happening, and it's happening because of our own hands. I mean, look at the interview between Putin and Tucker Carlson. He said the exact same thing. Did the people in your country even know what the petrodollar is, what the dollar is, and that you're destroying this hegemony with your own hands? And he's right. And you have to ask yourself, it's almost too stupid to be stupid. Could this actually be planned? Could we actually be dumb enough to not only sign an executive order to go green, which is the linchpin of the hegemony, but then weaponize the dollar in what most of the Southern Hemisphere views as completely and wholly hypocritical? This is not a trend that's stopping anytime soon, my brother. This is a trend that is only accelerating, but the Western media does such a horse crap job of telling us what's really happening, what's really important, that, as Buckminster Fuller says, you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. And most people don't see this coming, yet you don't have to be very astute. You just have to dig a little bit to see that this is real and this is not ending. In fact, if anything, it's accelerating.
I want to hone in on something you mentioned earlier. You've mentioned it in other interviews we've done too, and that is that central banks are front running the market by taking advantage of suppression of the paper gold market. Could you break down for us how that is done, the mechanism by which the paper market is suppressed, and how central banks are taking advantage of that?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the COMEX market was designed to offset risk. And like, for example, if I have 5,000 ounces of gold in my warehouse, I want to offset that risk by selling 5,000 ounces of gold on paper on COMEX so that if one goes up, the other goes down commensurate. I'm market neutral to the swings in the price of gold. If I have 5,000 ounces and the price drops $100, I'm out of $500,000. That's not good. But I would be up on the exact same amount on what I sold short on COMEX. That is a covered position and is done to offset risk. It's a hedge. But I asked my head trader, several months ago, what did it cost to control a 100-ounce gold contract? And he said roughly $7,000 in our margin account. The trade is just a couple of bucks. So if I'm a commercial or a central bank that's basically 35 times leverage or thereabouts. So if I have 500 million in my margin account as a commercial or a central bank or a sovereign wealth fund, I in essence control 15 plus billion in contracts. And when you take a look at how, after the CPI, the CPI numbers or the unemployment numbers rather came out the other day, bang, they smacked the crap out of it. Well, that's exactly what they do. They sell short contracts and they overload the market with paper. And when the price is falling on paper, you see massive deliveries coming off of all of the exchanges. They're draining the exchanges. As an example, in the last 2 years, we've seen 5.5 million ounces of let me take that back. 350 million ounces came off of COMEX in the last 2.5 years. 5.5 million ounces of silver were delivered out of COMEX this week. 40 million ounces of gold taken off of COMEX in the last 3 years. 877,000 ounces last week. That's the largest I can remember. So what you're basically seeing, huge amounts of what's called exchange for physical, where contracts are issued on COMEX and delivered in London. The Shanghai Gold Exchange being bled dry. What you are seeing is using the paper price and the levered paper price to, in essence, drain all of the exchanges. And then now you see Shanghai list higher prices for gold and silver on Shanghai Exchange, where gold is $100 higher than London or on COMEX, and silver is as much as $2.50 higher. So they're incentivizing the traders to make purchases in London and make purchases on COMEX and deliver it to Shanghai. And I wonder how many people even know the fact that the Shanghai Gold, that the London Metals Exchange, the LBMA, was purchased by the Chinese a few years ago. They own it. And now you have the Chinese saying, but by the way, we want to start trading Shanghai contracts on the LBMA where the price is higher. And by the way, we also want to start warehousing the metals traded on the LBMA in Hong Kong. So think about this for a minute. Do you see a problem here? Do you see how things are slowly being bled dry out of the West? And now what they're doing is they're arbitraging, they're warehousing the metals that on the exchange that they own. No one knows that. It's not called the Chinese Bullion Market Association. It's the London, but they bought it. They own it. So they're draining the exchanges, both the COMEX and the LBMA. They own the LBMA. They're listing Shanghai contracts on the LBMA, or will be soon. And now they want to warehouse metals traded on the LBMA in China, the largest importer and producer of gold in the world. They've bought for 14 straight months in a row. This is a game of chess while we think of checkers, and they are positioning themselves to, in essence, own all of the things that make the world go round, not just gold and silver, but anything, base metals, rare earth metals, and hard and soft commodities across the board. So, yeah, Jesse, they are thinking much more strategically than we are, and we're focused on the wrong things.
So since the last time we talked, another development in silver is that newsflash, it's basically done absolutely nothing as people have become accustomed to. Obviously, the need to be patient is there. The catalysts are in place. A lot of people online frustrated. How do you see silver positioned at the moment, and what are the potential catalysts that you think could move the price either up or down substantially here in 2024?
You know, Rick Rule said it best. He said something to the extent that when you go through many years of a structural supply deficit in silver, and at the same time, the speculators who bought it thinking that a lot of them thought they'd get rich, and I never sell metal to get wealthy. It is wealth, and probably will end up making you wealthy if you have strong enough fingertips. But these people are getting more and more frustrated. Many are capitulating, as you say, and that big rise everyone expects that attracted them in the first place, to me, in that contrarian environment, seems to be getting imminently closer because of that. Because when everyone finally lets go and says, I'm done, I can't take this anymore, that's when we see the rise. But when you talk about an asymmetrical risk-reward type of environment, what can I invest in that has the lowest downside risk and the best upside? I don't see a better thing in the world than silver, Jesse. And I try to be objective. I mean, if you're not objective, you're full of crap, and people will bust right through it. I think to myself, I mean, you know, you look at the Silver Institute, who's telling us the supply demand fundamentals, and they ignore the military industrial complex. They don't even put that in there. I gave a speech at the VRIC the other day, and you and I were talking about that. Usually that's where we see each other, in Vancouver. And 2 years ago, I gave a speech, and I've been saying for a long time that, you know, there's 500 ounces of silver in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. For years, I've been saying that. And last year, not this last one, but the year before, I gave a speech, and a man came up to me and he said, you know, I work as a consultant for the Department of Defense. And he says, I know there's some silver in there. I'm going to check on that. Now, I never heard back from him. I go and gave my speech again this year, and lo and behold, there he was. He had a handful of pictures. He said, everything I'm going to show you is declassified. And he showed me how they tested the Tomahawk cruise missile in the ocean in California on a automated bed about 50 feet under the water, and how they had problems shooting the Tomahawk cruise missile vertically instead of horizontally because of the guidance system and this and that. And he says, yeah, this was my baby. And he says, I got to tell you something. You're right. There's between 14 and 15 kilograms in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile, almost exactly 500 ounces. You're spot on. And this is a guy who worked on the Tomahawk cruise missile program. Now, that's just one form of munition. I mean, there's all sorts of high-tech weaponry and missiles and, you know, and aerospace and stealth fighters. All of these things need copious amounts of silver, yet it's not talked about in the supply-demand fundamentals. And I just, To me, when you see a country like India, Jesse, buy 400 million ounces of silver in the last 2 years, that's almost twice as much as is on COMEX. That's what we know of. This is not lost on a lot of the world. I believe silver should be reclassified not as a industrial metal, which certainly it is in green and digital applications around the globe, but maybe much more than that is a strategic metal where it is needed in things like warfare. And if you look around, all of a sudden, we're currently bombing two countries. We're involved in wars all around the world. And if we're not directly involved in them, it seems as though the companies who manufacture all this stuff in the United States are supplying the wars all around the world. Now, is it too far fetched to think, or is the line between conspiracy and reality not thin enough to realize that maybe there's something bigger at play here, that the people who are kind of pulling the strings around the world have made a fortune in creating war, and they need silver, period, in order to do it. And this is why I think you're seeing, this is the one thing they did not count on, Jesse, was countries like India standing for delivery, draining the exchanges. And if you look at the amount of silver that's left the COMEX over the last 2.5 years, it's pretty damn close to what India's accumulated. Now, it didn't all come from here, but my point to you is that there are a lot of countries around the world who aren't telling us the silver that they produce and accumulate. And I truly believe, logarithmic decay, that we will wake up one morning as the biggest, smartest money in the world, the most sophisticated, knowing the playbook, knowing where we are, who continues to accumulate these commodities, while the Western markets, which are just ridiculous in their overt manipulation right in your face, are actually falling right into their hands. And when we created this game, these countries were not able to really stand up on their own. Many of them were third world. And now all of a sudden they're industrialized, they're wealthy, and they know the game, and they're finding safety in numbers, and they are accumulating things like silver. So there are very few things on the planet, in my opinion, that offer the potential that silver does. And I try to poke holes in that. It has better upside potential than just about any asset on the planet. It is more undervalued than any asset on the planet. It has as many uses as any asset on the planet, and it's decreasing in nature, and it is disappearing. And the things that are used in industry, most of them are in landfills, such tiny amounts in a cell phone or in a motherboard or blown up in a bomb. Point of it is that this is one of those deals where, like I was saying, they're going to shake you best you can from the tree. And just when you let go, that's when it'll move. But again, you don't own it to get wealthy. It is wealth, albeit might be the best investment I've ever seen in my career.
Yeah, I like that comment about that it is wealth. Same thing with gold. I was talking to my parents the other day, and I've been stacking physical metals, and they were saying, "Oh, do you think it's going to go up?" And I said, I don't care. I'm not thinking about it going up."
Think about it, man. 5.5 million ounces were delivered this week. I mean, these are the bars that back the futures contracts. Who's buying 5.5 million ounces and taking possession of it in 1 week slowly? Now, they're not doing it too fast. Little by little by little, they're draining and draining and draining. Where 400 million ounces came out in the last 2 years. Well, excuse me, that was what India accumulated. But how much has come out? Real damn close to 400 million ounces in the last 2.5 years off of COMEX. So they are being drained, whether it be by central banks like India or sovereign wealth funds or family offices. It's happening.
Well, we've discussed the Great Reset before. We've talked about Klaus Schwab. Obviously, there is a theory out there that it's all starting to slip away for the WEF and the global elites trying to manipulate the world to conform to their viewpoint. Obviously, this ties into central banking. This ties into the fiat empire, which yourself and a lot of other guests, including Alistair McLeod, believe is on the way out. Do you see the same sort of trend emerging? Obviously, people who believe in personal sovereignty and freedom are still rattled over the whole COVID fiasco and how that was handled around the world. And a lot of people desperately want to believe that that sort of thing is going to come to an end. So is this just wishful thinking? Obviously, we are seeing some signs that the legacy media is starting to collapse. Massive layoffs of journalists. The numbers coming out of mainstream media outlets are extraordinarily low, and more independent media is on the rise, which is a very good move in the right direction. I'm wondering how you currently see everything positioned when it comes to the WEF, when it comes to the global elites and the central banks trying to impose their will upon the world.
Yeah, the mainstream media is just horribly pathetic. I mean, it's so bad. You wonder, like, really? I mean, what happened to journalistic integrity and investigative journalism, and all of these things are just dead. And there is pushback. You see the farmers protesting in Italy and Spain and Switzerland, Romania, India, Poland, all United States, all around the world, Canada. We're seeing all sorts of protests. There are signs that things are emerging. You have states, and you just saw the other day Iowa, and now Arizona, and before that Texas and Wyoming and Idaho and Alaska and Missouri and Kansas and North Carolina, Arkansas, Oklahoma. These states are proposing, some have passed legal tender laws saying gold and silver can be used for all debts, public and private. And the representative from Idaho said it best: we need to get away. We need to do what the central banks are doing and accumulate metals. Now, that's not really the WEF agenda, but it's all part and parcel. I guess what I'm saying is that to me, it seems everything is connected from this agenda where, you'll own nothing and be happy. The divisiveness that we've seen, this green agenda as an example, killing the petrodollar, the consequences of which I believe people have no idea. We signed an executive order to go green. We weaponized the dollar, and now we see the majority of all human population joining in this group when you consider the Belt Road Initiative, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, and the BRICS, and now the 35 countries that have formally applied on top of the 10 and another 20 informal. You're talking the majority of human population is rallying against the West because, well, we're going green, amongst other things. And so if they don't need to value oil in dollars, that's the Klaus Schwab moment, which we've talked about before, where the dollar gets dumped and interest rates spike to compensate for the hyperinflation that hits our shores, as everyone for 50 years has had to stockpile dollars, creating that synthetic demand, and it creates hyperinflation. Rates go to the moon. You can't have 30% inflation and 5% rates. Your currency dies. So now rates go, the banks collapse. They're over leveraged and capitalized. The dollar dies because everyone's dumping it, and stocks, bonds, and real estate all collapse in the face of spiked interest rates. And now you have someone to blame, Xi Jinping and OPEC and everyone else that did this to us. There's your Klaus Schwab moment. But when you talk about that, I mean, it's scary as hell, and maybe even worse in the face of the woke agenda that's killing this country, the whitewashing of our culture, the destabilization through open borders and massive debt, both publicly and privately, and undercapitalization across the board, and the political craziness and the divisiveness and the two-tier justice system. It just seems that everything's getting worse. So while I would love to believe that things are getting better, and there is certainly a little bit of a greater awareness to it, I don't know. To me, it just seems almost like things are getting worse. Now, I don't know if that's all tied into the WEF agenda. It's interesting. They had on their website right before the pandemic, they were simulating what would happen in a pandemic, and now they're simulating what would happen in a global cyber attack. And now you see companies like JP Morgan are spending $15 billion a year on cyber threats, on protecting their system. And how real is it? How connected is everything? And how about the power grid and the water system and all of this stuff that is quite antiquated? Or they keep talking about solar flares or a nuclear weapon being detonated in the atmosphere. And lo and behold, Russia now they're talking about capability to issue it for a ICBM up in space. I know I'm all over the place here, but I want people to understand that all of these things in my mind are connected, and whether they be loosely connected or directly connected. So yes, I am a patriot, and I want to believe in my soul. I got 3 kids, man. I want to believe that things are getting better, but I look around me and I see the stupidity, literally the stupidity in so many people and so many organizations that I shake my head. I can't believe it. And where 30% of this country thinks the current administration is doing a good job, to the point where you can't even have a discussion citing facts. I had a conversation with someone who I believe is one of the smartest people I know, just reads the wrong stuff, very well read, but not reading the right stuff. And I said, can you believe the number of Chinese nationals that are coming in across the Mexican border carrying Tumi suitcases and wearing a nice clean shirt? They didn't walk from Central America. And she says, I didn't see that. Where are you seeing that? And I'm thinking, my God, we're in so much trouble. Now the White House is saying it's one of the biggest issues. So the point I'm getting at, and it goes back to the media again, is that I don't think that while there is pushback, I almost feel that things seem to be spinning faster out of control. I hate to be a buzzkill, Jesse, but I don't see it getting any better. And whether it's all connected to the WEF agenda or not, I seem to feel that it is. I guess only time will tell. But look, I'll say it to you this way, as clearly as I possibly can. We have 200 BRICS meetings, as Alistair said, one of the smartest men in the world. I love Alistair's work, and if you're watching Alistair, you're certainly someone that I view as a mentor. And but as you know, look, 200 meetings leading up to the big one in October, an election in November. 12 million people entered this country illegally. If 0.2% of them have bad intentions, well, that's 24,000 people that want to do harm. You know, like 3 people shooting up the Kansas City football rally yesterday, or parade. I'm not saying they're connected, but that's 3 people. What if you have 24,000? How about 1%? That's 120,000. I hate to be doom and gloom. I hate to be a buzzkill, but let's just realize there is a fine line between conspiracy and reality. There is. And ask yourself, where are these people coming from? From all around the world. How are they getting here? Who's flying them to Central America or to Mexico to walk? Who is? How are they getting here? And so the point of it is that no, I think this is all connected, and I don't think it's getting better. And I think it's time people wake up. And I apologize because I am a happy-go-lucky dude. My parents were hippies. I grew up respecting everyone and having no problem with whatever people did, whatever ideology, whoever they want to sleep with, whatever drug they want. I don't care as long as you treat me the right way and don't impose yourself on me. And I know I'm all over the place here, but I just want you people to know that I am not prejudiced or against people coming to this country the right way. But there has to be a point where we look and say, is all of this stuff connected? Could it really be that they are trying to destabilize this country from the ground up? Look at the divisiveness: red, blue, black, white, rich, poor, vaccine, no vaccine. How do you view this war? How do you view that war? How about the border? How about the president? I mean, it goes on and on and on. And that's just here. That doesn't even speak to the horrible things that we've done to the reserve currency and to the rest of the world, at least as far as they're concerned, outside the border. You put it all together. Yeah, I mean, could the Great Reset happen? You're damn right it could. And I seem to think that the dollar recency bias and normalcy bias will be the undoing of a lot of very well-meaning, smart people who refuse to accept the fact that everything good comes to an end and everything good changes. And again, I want people to know I am the biggest patriot in the world. I'm the least likely person to ever achieve the success that this country has afforded me. And I'm horrified by what I see. And this is why maybe I have the stupidity or the courage to say what I do, because it bothers me to no end. More so than the mismanagement of the currency, more so than anything we've done outside the borders. If we were still a country that people revered and wanted to be a part of, if people wanted to take part in a country that didn't have a 2-tier justice system, that had fair elections, that had a safe country with solid borders and all of these things, where the First Amendment and respect for one another and the ability to say things to one another in a respectful manner, where we grow by learning different viewpoints, when all of these things which made this country amazing were still in place, I would have far less concern than I do. The fact that it's all been whitewashed away tells me that this isn't ending. In fact, it's probably only getting more severe.
Well, that's why we love having you on this show. You give us the truth and your unfiltered thoughts, and we do always appreciate that. I do want to touch on the broad market here for a moment. The S&P and the NASDAQ continuing to grind to all-time highs. You know, for people out there who view gold and silver as a means to store their wealth outside the financial system, who are preparing for a world where fiat currency could lose a massive amount of its value, How should they wrap their heads around the fact that the dollar continues to look fairly strong here, at least in the short term, and the broad market, seemingly led by a handful, or definitely not seemingly led by a handful of tech stocks, is outperforming everything at the moment?
Yeah, and again, just to go back, I hope Jesse, you accept. I hope you don't hold it against me. I mean, I try to be as authentic and honest as possible. I wonder sometimes, what the hell did I just say that for? But I mean it, and I'm sincere, right, wrong, or indifferent. So to all you out there, I love this country. I just hope we can figure out a way to fix it. Now, as far as the dollar is concerned, look, I don't know. It's a matter of time. The deteriorating finances of this country will have consequences, as will our deteriorating reputation on the world stage. And I think the people running our government exhibit arrogance and incompetence and have us all believing that equity is more important than ability. And I don't think any of this is lost on the world. Even more remarkable to me is, why would anyone lend money to the US government? And why would any commodity exporting country be happy to accept a currency that is rapidly losing value, can easily be frozen and now confiscated to address one of our agendas? A country that has chosen inflation over austerity, where the bond market has been a disaster over the last couple of years, and not to mention our finances are a mess. We crossed $34 trillion the last day of the year on 2023, January or December 2023. January 1st, 2023, the debt was 31.4 trillion and it closed $2.6 trillion higher. It took us 230 years to do that the first time. We did it in 1 year. We paid $900 billion in interest on the national debt, which will be over $1 trillion this year. 1 trillion seconds ago, 31,688 years ago. And how about the unfunded liabilities? I mean, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, which is 70 plus trillion underfunded. Government military pensions were 155 trillion in debt. How about the hundreds of billions of dollars it will cost to house and school and provide medical assistance to all of these new undocumented immigrants? And look, even the Congress, let's just make it real simple here. Okay, I can cite all of these numbers all day long, but the Congressional Budget Office, which is one of the last nonpartisan, bipartisan groups in Washington, came out and said that, and this was before you had this migration problem, that by 2031, in less than 7 years, 100% of all tax revenue will go to pay just the interest on the debt and the mandatory entitlement, like Social Security, which is 70 trillion in the whole. And by the way, they also said Social Security will be broke or bankrupt 3 years later or 2 years later in 2033. But let's just say it this way: how is it that the world's most dominant military and financial superpower will have to borrow 100% of all its discretional income, which includes military, or discretional spending, which includes military? I mean, you can't. And so I just think that you look at the big picture and you see that we are a country that is this close to being 130% debt to GDP. There's never been a country that's come back from that. Either they hyperinflate or they default. So those who see the dollar as being really strong right now, this is exactly what I'm getting at. Either you trust your gut and have strong fingertips and hang on and believe that there will be consequences for our actions and for our indebtedness and our continuation to spend ourselves and our future generations into poverty. We just gave another $60 billion to the Ukraine and we're broke. I mean, literally, we are broke. We're spending so much more than we take in. It's ridiculous. And at some point, the rest of the world will grow tired of taking our treasures. And now you got the Fed says, we're going to lower rates. No, they're not going to lower rates, but that's what they want us to believe, making that even less attractive. You're going to see rates go much higher. And ultimately, in my opinion, as inflation is here to stay and the reluctance of people to continue to buy our bonds of any duration will only get worse and worse and worse. So the recency and normalcy bias will be people's undoing. And to not be able to see past that, to look at the numbers, which are impossible to find unless you look. They don't talk about this on the media. They don't even talk about this really at all in the race for presidency. Yeah, they talk about our debt a little bit, but they don't get into it enough. Jesse, these things are real, brother, and I do believe that there will come a time when it's not just you and I that are talking about this. I started talking about the BRICS 4 years ago, and then about 6-8 months ago, right before they fired Tucker Carlson, he started talking about it. 2.5, 3 years later, you see it on Fox like they're on to something. Point of it is, by the time the mainstream catches on to this, it's going to be far too late. So God bless a guy like you who's doing all you can to get the word out there and allowing a guy like me to come and rattle and go in tangents. But I want people to know that my intentions are nothing but the very best in this world. I want this country to, with its back to the wall, to be able to push back and do the right thing. But I wonder if we even have it in us anymore. So again, sorry for being so scattered. I'm just a little fired up today. There's only so much of this stuff you can take day in and day out. But I will tell you this. I do believe that between now and November, you will see an acceleration of many, many things that will start to, I think, make this puzzle come together a little bit more clearly.
Well, that's why I think it's very important to have conversations like this to shine a light on some of the different topics that maybe some shows or some people are uncomfortable talking about. I think it's important that these things are brought up and to admit when things don't look great, and where there is room for improvement. So thank you so much once again for coming on, Andy. And for those who want to know more, tell us about Miles Franklin Precious Metals, what it is you do, and where people can find you.
So we've been in business now for 34 years. Obviously, we sell precious metals. We also have, I believe, the best storage program in the industry, with a relationship with BRICS and vaults all around North America. We have exclusives in fixed rate programs and safe deposit programs that you won't find elsewhere. We've never had a customer complaint. Doesn't mean we haven't made a mistake. We've made plenty. We try our darndest to make it right. And you can go to our website at milesfranklin.com. If you are in North America and want to purchase metals, do yourself a favor, send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. And that way we will be able to send you our price list that we don't publish, which is far more competitive than what our website shows. And Say Commodity Culture sent me, so we know where it came from, and we will make sure that any questions are answered, anything you heard on this show, or questions about IRAs or anything that's on your mind, or if you just want to see the price list, info@milesfranklin.com, or anything that you want to direct towards me, info@milesfranklin.com, and we'll certainly answer it.
Great. Well, I'll put a link to the website as well as that email in the description below. Thank you once again, Andy, for coming back on and sharing all your knowledge with the audience.
You're one of my favorite, Jesse. I'm always just an email or phone call away, and you can count me as interested anytime that anytime that you want to chat. I'm always happy to be here. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.